Hi guys, my name is Borrodante, and welcome back to Overpain. Today's patient is Amjad. Amjad? I'm gonna say Amjad because this letter is J. And this is their artwork, a pretty cool, I'm gonna say like a concept art portrait of this woman wearing some sort of a mashup of ancient Japanese outfits. I'm guessing like this at the bottom looks kind of like samurai kind of stuff with the skulls on top, and this kind of hat is more of a traveler nomad or maybe a rice field worker kind of hat, maybe. And this thing hanging down from the hat with some kind of extra thingies on it looks like something you would find somewhere on the porch next to a door. I don't know, I'm not sure. And yeah, there's also a bird nest with all kinds of birds on her head. So that's cool, I really like this picture, so let's see what Amjad has to say. Hi Borrodante. Hello, I'm a huge fan of your artworks and I love to watch every video you make, especially Overpain episodes. Awesome, I'm glad people like that, because I do too. So I was working on this painting for so long and I actually did it twice, because I wasn't happy with the first result, but I feel like the values still aren't what I hoped to accomplish. So please, if you could do Overpaint episode on this one and help me understand how to lay values properly, I would appreciate it so much. Well, yeah, let's work on that, on values, but maybe also somehow on the concept or on the composition of the way the character is designed, I think. I'm not sure. Maybe on small geometry details. That's also something to work on. So let's switch to iPad. Alright, so here we are. Let's maybe make the resolution a bit bigger. Yeah, that's better. Alright, so first thing I wanted to fix just right away, maybe, like, it's not an issue specifically, it's not a mistake, but the overall contrast of this image is kind of low, right? We can see how blacks are actually just middle grays almost. So again, this is not an issue. Sometimes you would totally make it work really well when you create a picture with the character appearing like there's a lot of air perspective in the view. So that works out pretty well, but I just want to give it a try. Generally, I feel like it would bring the character a bit closer, so let's go with levels and move that black closer to where the details are. Oh yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I think this already makes it appear much more immersive in a way, you know? And then this feels like an unfinished sketch, and this is closer to something that like means something as a final image. And maybe move the whites a bit closer as well, why not? Generally, it's a good idea to start a painting with a lower contrast and then move further from there, like adding more brights and more darks. But in here we see the final product being still with a very low contrast, so I just went ahead and fixed that, if you want to call it a fix. And maybe slightly move gamma like this. Alright. So before I dive into the time-lapse mode and paint all over the place, let's talk on the general, like, the values. This is what Amjad had a question about. So, well, let's think a bit more on the global contrasts of the image. So under the hat, we need a good reason for the face to be bright. Like, this brightness is on the level of the objects on top of the hat, which is pretty much in any case a bit too strong. So I'm gonna lower down this brightness just a little bit. I feel like this will make the whole situation of a face under a hat more realistic, like we will actually see what we're supposed to see. So at least a little bit tone it down. And another thing, I would bring a bit more logic to this lighting. Like, there's still, like, this is a pretty high contrast of brightness over here. Also, it looks like a beard now. With such a massive hat on top of the head, the only way this light would appear in here is if we would have another light source lighting up the face like this, some kind of reflected light. So let's think on it exactly that way. Let's make it hit the face from that angle. So maybe we'll darken some other areas now if we think about it that way. And here there will be a pretty strong shadow from the hair. Like, make it real. Like, if there is no light behind this hair, then make it actually darker, because there is not a lot of reason for a lot of ambient light to appear in there, so makes sense to make it a bit stronger. So we'll work on that more further ahead. And another thing, the top part of the face is noticeably darker than the bottom, even when I made it a bit darker at the bottom as well. But the hair, generally, it's probably kind of dark hair comparing to the skin on the face, right? When the skin suddenly becomes much darker, the hair doesn't really get darker, so I'm gonna make it darker where the face gets darker. So it would have a consistent difference of values between the dark hair and the bright face. And a slightly smoother transition the way it goes on the face as well. Yeah, so something like this. I would probably add some of the shadow of the face of this head onto this hat over here. This is also where this light source would cast a shadow further ahead. But at the very edge, right here, we can work on that air perspective thing that was kind of showing up generally. Or not. This is not the best place to do that, I guess. So let's just go darker with the hat and have a stronger silhouette of the face, because now everything around the face is actually like legitimately darker. So we'll see the face much better. Always a good thing to have. Stronger shadow from the nose will really indicate the direction of the lighting on this face. So yeah, I'm not sure if I'm doing like the best lighting for what it was intended to be, but what to take away from this is that in order to make good lighting, you have to really come up with the real kind of lighting, like how exactly the light would hit the face when it's covered by such a massive hat, when obviously the main light source, the sky, is really on the top, and we really want to show the face, so we can't make it too dark, otherwise it's just gonna look wrong. Like, what's the point of a portrait where you can't see the face? So for that, we need to come up with another light source. This is something they do in movies, right? When they have a close-up shot, but it would be just too dark, they add another light source to highlight the face, to let us see what we have to see. So we do the same thing in a painting, and if we really think through a real lighting that would follow the geometry properly, yet give us good exposure on the things that we need to show, that will really pay off, because properly positioned, physically correct lighting always dictates a really good mood. So yeah, we'll work more on that area, of course, make the lighting more legit in details. Another thing, the bird, this big bird, seems like it should be much brighter, since it's on top of the head and there's much brighter light going on. It's the actual daylight, I suppose, so this should be way brighter. Otherwise, it doesn't really feel like it's outdoors, like something's wrong with the lighting on the bird, because it has to be much brighter. Anything under the hat will be noticeably darker than anything on top of it. That's just how it goes. Unless we really have like some insane project light source on her face, but that would break the whole mood of the ancient whoever that is. We shouldn't have like a very unnatural light source, like too bright. So yeah, maybe I'll introduce some more anatomy definition to the bird, because right now it looks like a very big almond with the head of the bird. So branches, the sticks, they're generally dark objects, so even in the bright light source, they're definitely gonna be darker. All over the place, like all of them. They gotta be much darker than the birds. Otherwise, what kind of birds are these that they're brown like branches? So literally just covering it all up with darker gray. And some contact shadows to make sure we have legit physics of the light. In such tight areas, there won't be much light at all. Plus, considering how dark the branches are, they're really gonna get close to being black, but very accurately. Don't go too far where the branch is obviously exposed to the skylight. You shouldn't add a lot of that darkness. And like literally the birds, I can see how the birds really get darker very quickly in this area, like from here to here, such a huge transition of brightness, probably to make sure that that you can distinguish the geometry of the birds like they're under the branches for us. But really, considering that we chose the branches to be darker, which I think makes more sense, we now don't have to do that. We can actually make the birds as bright as they're supposed to be. So they're actually gonna be distinguished from the branches by being brighter than the branches and not the other way around. So I assume these birds and whatever, they're not exactly any specific birds, they're just birds, but usually it's a good idea to make little birds brighter than the grown-up bird, and in this case it's almost the opposite. So let's make sure they're really bright, like very light colored. They have their fur, their feather should be really bright. I think they will look much better. We'll check it out from the distance to see how they work out in the composition, but I think this is something to introduce to the picture definitely. Oh yeah, they look much more like little birds now than what they used to be. They're kind of like sitting in the mud in the original. And this, yeah, definitely feels like they actually have a color. Before that, branches were kind of like the same unidentified brightness as the birds. And it's all like, doesn't really look right. There's something wrong with it, you can't really tell. But that's what was wrong about it. Some things are overall brighter than the other things. And when you visualize them, you should make sure that you keep that consistency of brightnesses. So yeah, that's another thing that we'll fix. I'll work on it a bit more as well. And after that, we'll think a bit more on the design of the character. So for now, let's do the stuff that I mentioned. Okay, so iPad failed to save the recording that I just did, which is awesome. Good thing I restarted. Anyway, so this is what I've got so far. Mostly I made sure that I follow the consistency of the brightness of different objects. So we can see how the bird nest is now actually looking appropriately dark, with the berries as dark as well. By the way, I'm not sure what these black dots on the hat were, so I replaced them with just more berries on it. I hope that's what these black dots meant. So yeah, made the hair darker, and as you can see, these bands on the hair, I actually made them look brighter than the hair. So now it looks more like actual objects with their actual colors in them, even though this picture is black and white. Overall, by the way, like, look at the birds, the big bird and the smaller ones, and the nest, and pretty much most of the objects, the hair. The original kind of looks more like it's a slightly glorified sketch, when this is actually looking like a painting, because I actually managed to get rid of the outlines, even though they were almost gone, the outlines, but still we can see how visibility of objects really relied in many cases on these outlines over here, because if we remove them, in many cases objects will just blend into the environment, into the sky. Like here as well, like actual outlines, they are still present. A lot of that stuff, like in here, obviously a dark outline of the sticks, and here is just literally a sketch. And in here on the hair, like in many cases, these bands on the hair, they really relied only on the outlines, because otherwise they would be the same color as the hair. So what I made sure to do is I imagined the actual colors of these objects, even though we're painting in black and white, which is an interesting thought. If you're rendering the lighting in black and white, you still have to think on the colors. It's just that, like, the value of the object, the overall brightness of the object, is like a big part of the actual final color of the object. So even when we're working in black and white, we still have to think through the colors. So if everything is of one color, this is what you get, pretty much. Like, we have a little bit of work on the different brightnesses. For instance, the hair is a bit darker than the face, but other than that, everything else is pretty much the same color. And that's really hard to work with. Many things will blend together when they shouldn't. Like, we know that branches have to look like a dark spot, and the little birds in that nest have to look like a bright spot. Otherwise, they don't really look like the nest and the birds. And so when I made that happen, they suddenly start to look a lot more realistic and just interesting, like finalized. So this is an interesting idea. Even though you're working in black and white, you still have to think through the colors of the objects, at least in the overall brightness of them. And so yeah, I worked back and forth on different things, pretty much everything I mentioned. Now I wanted to talk a little bit about the actual design of the character, and I mean the outfit. One thing I'm not gonna actually fix is the hat. What's wrong with it is really easy to see when we mirror the picture. I mean, I may be wrong, I didn't paint a lot of traditional Japanese hats or whatever, but the head, if it goes like this, plus the hair, it's just, even geometry wise, it should take more space under the hat. So the hat would actually be more like over there. Well, not that tall, but you know, it would be there. And right now, the main problem of this character is that it seems like this woman doesn't really have the top part of her head. It's squished in a bit. I mean, I'll probably move it around right now and we'll see how that will work out, but it's gonna be quite a dramatic change to the whole picture, since the face is one half of the picture and the whole hat with the birds is another half of it, so it's gonna be like rebuilding a lot of stuff. So we'll think on that. And another thing is this. Like, I can see this looks kind of like what samurais had back then, like this kind of shoulder thing, but it's missing something. Like, even on the samurai, there's like a top something first, where the shoulder will start and the trapezius area will end, and then the shoulder starts with these things, as we can see on that reference. But in here, it just starts from the neck and immediately just like this, so there's no shoulder on this character. As far as I can understand, she's standing kind of like this, so the shoulder is somewhat around here, and she's standing with her everything in that kind of direction, so she's sideways to us and turned her head. But it's kind of really hard to see it right now because it's not really there. We don't have an actual shoulder on this character, so that's one thing I'm gonna fix. Another one is, I'm not sure what this thing is. Like, it seems like it belongs on some kind of porch or something, but at least I'm gonna just make it a bit smaller and let it hang there, and we'll actually add these little objects that were marked in. We'll see how that'll work out. Maybe it's gonna have like a little smoke coming out of it with the essence smoke kind of stuff. That would kind of work out, I guess. I don't know about the design overall, what's behind this character. I know her name is Lady Bird, and I don't know anything else. So yeah, we'll redesign the shoulder a bit. We'll keep pretty much everything, but it's gonna start like this. Will move somewhere over here, I think. Alright, so I guess this is what it's gonna be in the end, more or less. There may be more ideas on everything all over the place, like there are probably some kind of strings connecting these sticks that are making the hat. So that would be a good detail as well. Something like that. Yeah, so I don't know. It turned out pretty cool. As you have seen, I've been using the reference, this one, and this is the way it changed the shoulder. It kind of looks more interesting as far as I can judge. Very concept-y. And we can actually like see some kind of shoulder going on in there, which is nice. And yeah, moved the hat around and made the whole composition slightly lower, because I think the whole bird thing on the hat is a pretty important part of the composition, so why not bring it a bit closer to us, to the center of the picture, so we would see it better. And yeah, some smoke from this stick on the string in front of her face was a good addition. And yeah, I think with better contrast and whatever, this picture turned out much more solid as something to be interested at when you look at it. So yeah, this was about an hour and a half of work, and we've got to a much more finalized look, not just a sketch kind of rendering, but actually something that looks closer to just a black and white painting. So yeah, hope whatever I said was clear. Thank you, Amjad, for your submission. This was a really interesting character and an interesting challenge. I actually myself never really did any kind of Japanese style characters. I'm not even 100% sure if this is a Japanese style character, because everything may be interpreted differently actually, because nothing was defined quite exactly enough to be sure, but that maybe was the mistake, and I chose the direction and went with it. So anyway, I never did any kind of Japanese characters like that myself, and it was interesting to look up a reference and give it a try in visualizing it like this. So yeah, this was fun. Hopefully it was fun to watch, and the whole info on the values and stuff was clear enough and useful. If any of you guys want me to overpaint your picture like this, the link to my Patreon page is in the end of this video. You become my patron and post the picture in the timeline over there. And I thank you for watching if you did. I guess it did if you're here. Leave a like and subscribe, tell a friend, stare at people suspiciously, do whatever you want. And I will see you in the next one. Bye! I actually enjoyed it quite a lot. Interesting how little details, like proper overall values of the objects, and just looking up some references and thinking a bit more precisely on the lighting, can make the whole thing a lot more legit, like more of a mature concept art, right?